Weeks now, farmers in European countries have been staging protests against declining subsidies as well as new rules to try and mitigate climate change. While these protests may seem far away, they are likely to have an impact on our agriculture. This is because Europe is our second most important trading partner for agricultural exports. New production rules would also apply to agricultural imports. Let's speak now to Wandile Sihlobo, Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Wandile, always a pleasure to have you here on Newzroom Afrika. It seems while the EU farmers are sneezing, South Africa could be the ones catching the cold.
Absolutely, Masa, because we are an export-oriented agricultural sector, which then means that whatever happens in the global environment, we tend to be affected by that. And these three aspects that the EU farmers are complaining about: one, being the environmental policies; two, declining subsidy; and three, the aspects of protection that they need. Two of them are relevant for us, particularly where saying the EU lawmakers should protect them against unfair global competition. And secondly, the one around the pesticides use, which is part and parcel of the environmental laws, is one aspect that is also relevant to South Africa. So we've been monitoring both of those. As you rightly put it, the EU is very important to South Africa. 27% of our agricultural exports go to that region. So anything that could restrain our exports there is something that we definitely feel economically within the farming sector of South Africa.
Now, Wandile, just speaking of those policies as well, particularly when it comes to, pesticides and agrochemicals, is there a way that there can be a reasonable transition where there can be a balance that does incorporate the concerns around climate change, but also that doesn't impact productivity and output of these farmers as well?
In its original document, the Farm to Fork strategy of the EU, which is part and parcel of the bill, it did put quite some stringent rule about how pesticides use should decline, fertilizer use should decline, and that's exactly what has been the point of contention amongst other aspects for the EU farmers, to say they need a sustainable transition on that. Now, we saw yesterday the EU lawmakers coming out and saying, look, we may have to relook then that particular proposal so that we can come up with a much more sustainable and easily adjustable way than the overnight drastic decline in those chemicals. And that's exactly what was going to be an issue also for South Africa, because it would mean then the rules that apply to the farmers or to the export countries, they do apply. And I think the farmers, and certainly with us as the Agricultural Business Chamber, it's not that we don't pay attention for environment. We care a lot about soil health and the agricultural environmental side. But I do think that a much more sustainable way between the environmental policies as well as taking care of the productivity of the sector, that's the balancing act that is needed. And I think the EU lawmakers, the message that they sent out to the farmers yesterday is something that we do welcome also sitting down here in South Africa.
So from that message from the EU to the farmers, this farm to fork strategy, will it be amended? Will it be re-looked at?
The idea now, from what we understand, has been communicated by the lawmakers, that the aspect around the chemicals and the fertilizer use, which the initial strategy had suggested that it needed to decline significantly, it will need now to be scrapped or relooked. As then the level and the transition time after that will be, that's something that is yet to transpire. So for us, it's a positive, because then now if it offers more time for adjustments, that's certainly something that we are looking at, so that we adapt and we produce more environmental friendly. We try to sustainably reduce any pesticides that perhaps may have environmental concerns, but I think that all needs a time frame. And there was also a disagreement about some of the chemicals, of course, that needed to be reduced, which is part and parcel of the discussion that the EU lawmakers are open to right now.
Climate change, of course, is a big factor as well, but if we don't reach consensus anytime soon, what impact will this have on the South African food security? Will it be direct and felt immediately?
I think with all of the information now that is available, on the environmental side, on the environmental policies, it is positive that the EU lawmakers are saying they are scrapping that or they are reviewing it. Because it does mean then that on the exports activity of our farming sector, we will continue to the EU side. The one aspect that we are worried about is the EU farmers saying, look, we also facing tough competition from the world market. Because what that says now is that there is some protectionism thinking that is emerging within the EU. Certainly, as South Africa, we already tasted a flavor of that when the EU was raising all kinds of concern about our citrus export to that region. So those are all of the aspects that we are watching. Our desire is that we could continue to have a stronger relationship with the EU, see a good flow of our agricultural products to the EU under the existing agreement, which is the IPA agreement that is between our region, our country and the region there. So those are some of the rules that we were watching in here. There's no view as yet from the EU lawmakers as to what they say on the protectionism side, and that's the aspect that I think they perhaps not to respond more on, because that would raise some worries on our side.
Well, we'll also certainly be keeping a close eye on those developments. Thank you so much for joining us and for your time this afternoon. That's Wandile Sihlobo, Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa.